Welcome to the Crazy Cool Family Podcast with Don and Suzanne Manning. Parents, what if we could give you the power to transform your family into something absolutely amazing?
A family where everyone is healthy, gets along, loves Jesus, and has great purpose in life.
Hey, let us flip your thinking to unlock the power God has given you to create your own Crazy Cool family.
Hey, this is Jeff Zog from the Dad Awesome podcast. I love the Crazy Cool family, and specifically I hopped into Basecamp, all of these resources, the video resources, the specific guides that let me put the names of my daughters and my wife and just showing me visually, hey, am I making progress? What areas can I attend more to? So I'm so thankful. I want to encourage you guys to hop into Basecamp, sign up, dive into those first intro videos. It's been so helpful for my family.
Hey parents, welcome to the Crazy Cool Family Podcast, usually with Don and Suzanne Manning, but I'm here with Dan Luigs.
Yes.
Right? Yes, Luigs.
Yeah, we can celebrate.
Luigs. And I was like, there's no way I can pronounce that. But Dan is, we met through, he has a podcast called The Journey of a Christian Dad that you've been doing now, Dan, for a couple of years?
Couple years, yeah.
But it just came, and I was curious, the story about that, it just kind of came out of, how did you start that podcast?
So I've got a number of different guys in my life that have like number one ranked podcasts in the world now. So the number one family podcast in the world is like a close personal friend. The number one health and wellness guy in the world is not close personal, but a friend.
Right.
Just evolved that way. Like, this is pretty cool. In the meantime, a bunch of book authors are in my life, and I am not a podcast host and I'm not a book author. And people around me are like, why don't you write a book? Why don't you do a podcast? What would I do those on?
Right.
And I'm like, I don't want to do a business podcast. I don't want to do a referral relationship type podcast. I really don't want to do any of that stuff. I just want to be guests on Crazy Cool Family Podcast and things like that because it's fun. And I just got to like being an assistant coach. You just show up and you do whatever the head coach tells you to do, and it's simple.
Right.
And I didn't want to do a podcast because of all the stuff that goes involved. You got to plan it. You got to edit it. You got to put the websites together, all that stuff. And I didn't want to do any of that. All I wanted to do was grab a microphone and talk and help people. And then I went on this dang retreat and I was like, God, life's wonderful and my friends are wonderful and my family's wonderful and I got nothing. I'm going to go into this isolated prayer time right now, and all I can think of to do is just to praise you and thank you. Like, this is the greatest. And if you want to do that for a couple of hours and you just listen to me, thank you and praise you, like, that's what we'll do. And I'm an idiot because I didn't ask if you wanted to talk about anything, God.
And God said, wow, here we go.
What a jerk I am. I'm going to hang out for a while with my best friend, and I didn't even ask him if he had anything to say.
Wow.
And I apologized. I said, I'm really sorry, God. I can't believe that this happened. Have you got anything that you want to talk about, God? And instantly he comes back with, yeah, your podcast. I said, no. We were all just at lunch together. You were there. I know you were. I know you heard me tell the other guy I absolutely was not doing a podcast and that I was going to do was be a guest. And he goes, yeah, you're right. I was there. I did hear you. And then there's that, the way God can speak sometimes, a powerful, confident voice.
Mm-hmm.
The octave dropped a little bit. And he says, so anyway, about your podcast. I said, yeah, okay. What about it, God? What would I do it on? And he goes, how about like a Christian dad? How about doing it on the Christian dad? Yeah, okay. That's kind of something that's important to me. That one's something I can do for a while. That's got some longevity. That one's got an eternal purpose to it. Okay, I'm with you. But what would I call it, God? He goes, I don't know. Try out the Christian dad. Like, I kid you not, the words he said were, try out the Christian dad. And at this retreat, we didn't have cell phones or internet. And I get home, a day and a half, 2.5 days later. And the first thing I do, grab my phone and I type in, thechristiandad.com. That website doesn't exist. That domain doesn't exist.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I'm like, how does that not already been purchased. So I bought it right away and, got all the .nets and all that stuff and just started. I'm like, I don't know where to start, but I'm going to start doing research and figuring this out.
Well, I
So
think
that was how it started.
so. The podcast is called The Journey of a Christian Dad. It's a great podcast. I've listened to a few episodes now, but really, I think that's indicative of, so as we launch this podcast, I love it that I think Dan has been a guy. I love the story of a family that is walking with Jesus today and how they got there. Because so often, families see us now, and we tell our story. We have 7 kids and, and the kids love Jesus and we're, 30 years into it, but it's like, and we can tell our story of how we got there, but it's so cool to see. That's just one story. There's so many stories of how families have gotten to where they are today. So tell us, first of all, I want to talk a little bit about where your family is right now. You got 2 girls, right?
Yep. 2 daughters. Yep. 9 and 8. Yep.
You've been married for how long?
Almost 19 years.
So you've been married for 19 years. We were just talking about this, so that means there was like 10 years before you had kids. And
yes.
There's a story in that we'll talk about. But today, what would you say is the state of your family right now? So, your marriage, your kids, your work, your work, what do you do for a living, that type of stuff. Where are you at this point?
Yeah, at this point, outside looking in and like, man, it's the perfect family that those guys are. They never have troubles. Everything's always great in that family. We've got troubles. We've got troubles.
From the outside, but it's a little different on the inside, but still good, right?
But they're not mountain troubles. These things that may have sidetracked or derailed us, or shot us way off course, or spiraled us into angst. Now we've got Christ, we've got the Lord, and so the things that show up are things that little speed bumps. You can navigate, and we've got the resources around us so that whenever something does come up, we can get through it. But I'd say our family's, just totally based on love. So love God, love ourselves, and love others.
And you're in the insurance business.
Yep. I've got my insurance business. I every time I think about it, tears come to my eyes. I'm so grateful for how that has grown over the years and has afforded myself and family and people around me just an amazing ability to get things done.
And we talked about this a little bit, but I want you to expand on it. Your strength really in business. I'm trying to give the guys a little perspective, and we'll involve the wives in a minute. But I mean, from a guy career standpoint, your strength is selling, connecting, right?
Yep, absolutely. Selling and connecting. So there's a guy yesterday who's out of Florida, wrote a book. He's one of those big time coaches, and he made a Facebook post and he says, it's Friday and I just like to recognize and appreciate people. And today it's Dan Luigs. And he says he's got this ability to connect people, and he does it in a way that's good for everybody. And somehow he puts 2 people together and then it turns into like 16, like 1 + 1 isn't 2. It builds upon each other. And I was like, man, it's like the coolest thing how he made that video on a Friday. And then I was actually yesterday going to meet somebody. I'm like, I'm sharing this video. I don't know why I'm sharing it. One, I liked it, so I kind of just wanted it to be in my Facebook reminders. But the next guy that I met with, I went to have a late lunch with him, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this video and this guy, I've got to connect him to the guy that I had lunch with next. I had no idea that those 2 were a fit, but so that's been a huge strength.
So sales connector, pretty dedicated. I mean, so and what's your wife like?
My wife.
What's her name?
My wife's name is Corey.
So yeah, Dan and Corey. And so what's she like?
She has a way, like a direct, whatever's on her mind, she speaks. She was a trained teacher, and she was a teacher for years. She now is a book author. She writes books and helps people publish and writes books.
What kind of books does she write?
Children's books.
Oh wow! I
So
need to go. This sounds like our wives are very similar, and Suzanne's always had a desire to write children's books. So maybe we might be.
yeah, love
Yeah,
to connect those
yeah,
two. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, she loves to hear a good story and then turn that into something that kids and parents both appreciate. So the first book she wrote, all the guys I know that read it are like, this is the one kids book that I read.
oh wow!
That I
Yeah.
like that I like reading a second or a third or a fourth time. I
Well,
don't
and the other
groan
one
when the
is, we
kids
really
run
want
this
to
one.
take some of our connection, things we do with Crazy Cool Family about relationships and connection, and put it in a kid's story so that kids are learning that connection stuff early. Then so the parents can read it to the kids and enforce embody the principles that we want them to learn. So it drips it into the parents as well as the kids. So
Yes, that's where I was going to go with that. Was the parents then also, even like in all the things you've done in life, sometimes you forget about the super basic stuff that you used to do. And when you've got to teach it to somebody, you're like, I remember when I used to do that and that works so well.
well, you remember too reading the Bible stories, going, "Hey, this is pretty cool." I didn't know this story or whatever in the children's books or whatever. You wound up learning the story as well as your kid did because you have to read
Yes.
it like 12 times, or 12. You're reading the same book over and over again to the three
Yes.
because they
Yes.
have
Yeah.
their favorites and things. So yeah, that's a great idea. So anyway, Corey is a writer and a mother. She stays at home now, right?
Correct.
She's a
Yeah.
teacher and now stays at home.
Yeah.
So I love it that so let's and I have this picture of your family and I know that it may look perfect on the outside, but we all know that we got to work at our marriage. We got kids are good, but they're not perfect and all the things. But it is, as you would say, you've worked through a lot of issues. You're super involved in your church, right?
Yeah. Very involved.
Yeah, and it's a good season, but it didn't always. I love to now kind of go through the journey of how you get there because I think so often we think, oh, that just happened,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that just and it's always been that way. And Dan and Corey were this beautiful Christian couple that got married 19 years ago. They've memorized scripture every day for the last 19 years, and now they've got this perfect little deal. But it wasn't quite like that, was it?
No, it absolutely wasn't like that. There was a whole lot of rockiness in between the beginning and now.
Well, and I mean, I think that as we start out, really, it's only been in the last 8 years or so that you guys have been actively involved in your church, right?
Together. Yep. As
Yeah,
a team.
yeah.
Yes, that's
And then
very
before
true.
that, there's so in your insurance business, you started like in the second decade of your married life.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about how it began and kind of give us a little bit of background of how you guys kind of got to where you are today.
Yeah, yeah. So I used to work retail, sold electronics, computers, appliances, whatever. So if it was for your house, it was something I did. And then I went into sales management, which was great. At the time I met my wife, she came in to buy a computer, and I sold TVs and stereos. And the computer guys couldn't talk to a pretty girl, or really people in general. They would
Yeah.
kind of hang out and wait until a customer said, "Please sell me a computer. I need to buy one." And me being able to talk to people, I'm like, "Hey, how's it going? What are you looking for? Do you know anything about computers?" I'm like, "I do. I know the price. I know how much they cost." I ask them a few questions and sell them a computer. And so my wife back then, she was a college student. She was buying her first computer for college, and went over and helped her out. After a little bit, turns out it was Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
I said, "Hey,
Wow.
what are your Valentine's plans?" And she evaded answering the question. So I didn't know if she was, involved with somebody or not involved with, whatever. But over time, we started dating and everything, and then got married. But so I met her at that stage of life, and I was, making money, and she was a college student, and she got to be a teacher. And so I supported her through college and into her career. It was great that she became a teacher because it provided a nice, stable job and income. And
So
I
were you
was
already out of school at that point?
I was out of school. Yep.
Yeah, and so now, and you also served in the military. So had you already done the military service at that point?
I had just finished the military when I met her. So they asked me to re-up, and I said, I can't do it. I'm
Yeah,
not going to do it. And they said, why? And I said, well, because my future family, I can't imagine getting pulled around the world like I've been pulled around the world. Like,
right.
but you're single. I'm like, I know I'm single, but I got a real good feeling that
And something's about to
in the
change.
next 6 years, there's going to be a family that comes around. And I couldn't imagine being away from my wife and kids. So the answer is no. I don't care how much money you're going to throw my direction. I'm not doing that.
Yeah. And so you're working retail, and she gets out of school, but really not a lot of involvement in church, and where was God
No.
in your life at that y'all's life at that point?
Yeah, at that point, my wife had been, as a kid, grew up in wherever the band was good at church, wherever the plays and artistic side of things. If the entertainment factor was high, their family would go to church. But as soon as something went wrong at that particular church, then they'd hang out for a while until somebody clued them in that the entertainment value was high at a different church.
Wow, that's so fascinating. Yeah, so kind of an evangelical church
Yeah,
experience.
yeah. And in my life, me and my parents and family, we went to one church and stayed at that one church just forever. And then when you moved towns, you'd go to the new church and you'd stay at that church forever. And there was a time in my life when I was in college, and I was working overnights and weekends and all day, all night. We called them bell to bells in the restaurant industry. So anybody that's worked restaurants. And
Yeah.
I went
Now,
to church at 7:30 in the morning, and on the way home, I fell asleep and ran into a car.
oh no.
And that was where I made a deal with God. I said, God, obviously this is not the life you want for me. You don't want me to fall asleep and run into cars. And since I have to work every night and every day, and it conflicts with church, and church is way too early, and I'm going to fall asleep every weekend, it seems like, uh, we're good, right? Like, I'll
Right.
just do the work thing, and then we'll connect back again on Sundays down the road
I think it's
whenever life changes.
how we partner with, I mean, how we kind of, argue with God and partner. Hey, God, I'll do this. I have there's so many stories about that, even in college. Hey, God, once I get through college, this will change or whatever, just so many bargains. That's the word I'm looking
Bargains, yeah,
for.
yeah.
Bargains we make with God.
God, I'm so drunk and sick and throwing up all over myself, and I don't know where I am. And if you save me just this one time, God.
Yes, exactly. Oh, isn't that, so but now and also you grew up Catholic, right? And
Yes,
your wife
yes,
grew up evangelical. So we got that issue going on, but neither one of you are really going, this is all the first decade of your marriage. And to top it out, you're also trying to get pregnant, but that's
yes.
not working.
That wasn't working at all. So we got pregnant, and then after years of trying, I got pregnant, and I'm like, oh, this is wonderful, and we went and doctor, and they're like, the heartbeat. And so we're like, can we tell our family now? And doctor's like, yeah, absolutely. So told my parents and a few closer family members. And the very next day, I went to work, and my wife calls me. She says, something ain't right. We went back to the doctor. The doctor kept us in the office from 9 o'clock until noon, and they kept us there waiting that length of time because I'm pretty sure they knew what was happening, and they didn't want all the other people that were there to hear our angst and our tears and see us just in shambles.
Wow. How far along was she?
12 weeks.
Oh no. So really it had gone past the first. That's so,
Yeah, so we're right there, and we're like, we can
yeah.
tell everybody, right? Yeah, we're past it. We're past the
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
past the challenges. And then they stick the ultrasound there, and we just heard the heartbeat and everything the day before, and there was nothing, Don. There was nothing.
Mm.
And I look at that doctor, and I'm squinting my eyes, and that doctor's not saying anything. And I'm like, where's that? You're a doctor, like, you've done this before. Where's the courage? When are you going to share the news that I already know? And she stayed silent for such a long time, and she may have even said, I'll be right back. She may have even left the room and then come back and delivered the news. But I was just so angry because the day before we heard the heartbeat, we saw everything, and
Yeah.
everything's perfect, and you're going to have a kid.
Yeah. And how far you guys have been married? What, 5, 6, 7 years at this point?
Yeah, yeah, in that range. Yeah. And then
So
that,
that takes you on this journey of not being able to get pregnant. And I think that, so, and I think so many couples go through this, and so what happened after that?
so we thought, it seems like a good idea. We, keep trying. We kept trying. Eventually we got pregnant again. Like, hey, this is great. And then after, around the same time frame, had another miscarriage.
Oh no. Wow.
And you're like, we that was going on. We went to the mall back when malls were a thing, and we just walked around, just her and I holding hands, not even really talking. Occasionally we'd say something, and we're like, isn't it so weird how everything's just stopped and still and unimportant in our life? And everybody that's in the world around us that we can see has no idea what we're going through right now. We're currently having a active miscarriage,
Yeah.
but there wasn't anything for us to really do other than just be.
Yeah.
And then we had lunch later on with my parents, and we're like, this is, unfortunately not going to go right. Like, my parents like, oh, let's pray, let's have faith, like we can do all that, but it's past that point. The doctor and the signs and stuff, they're like, this is going to end, without you guys going full term and having a baby. And
Yeah.
that was that. And then we started seeing every doctor in town we could, spending so much money. We didn't have much money back at that time, and so forking over 500 a month and a couple thousand a month was to have no baby was felt hopeless. And my wife had heard about in vitro one time, and we go to the doctor that, really cool doctor, unbelievable personality, like the type of guy where you're like, want to go hang out on the weekends or go slalom skiing with, or go boating with. Like, this guy's great. And me being in sales, you recognize certain things and you read nonverbals and everything. And my wife, I didn't know this was her thought. I had no clue. And she says, hey doc, what about in vitro? And this was blindsiding to me. I'd not done any study and didn't understand much about it. And the doctor goes, oh, yes, absolutely. That is a great idea. That is absolutely what we should do, because I think we've made it past everything that we can try. And I said, okay. I watch him, and his eyes light up. I could see dollar signs in his eyes,
Oh gosh.
visible.
Yeah.
And he goes, what I'll do is I'll call the in vitro place and I'll set the first appointment for you, and I'll make this go.
And the sales guy in you is going, this is setup, or it's not a setup, but I mean, he's got a motivation.
Absolutely got a motivation. And the
Yeah.
thing was, we had something called MTHFR. It's a blood disease that guys never know that you have. It doesn't really affect you in a daily life kind of thing, but what it does is it causes blood clots in fetuses between 10 and 12 weeks. And those blood clots then stop the fetus from growing, which then, of course, you die. And so anyway, we had that going on. I'm like, how the heck is in vitro going to solve this problem? We've been pregnant before, and in vitro doesn't get you to 13 weeks.
You're right. You still have the same blood disorder.
Yeah. And I said, hey, doc, how's in vitro solve this? And he goes, oh, go over there, have your first appointment. They'll walk you through the rest of it. So we walk out of the door. My wife says, oh, this is the greatest thing in the world. I'm so happy that we're here, and this is wonderful, and we're going to have a baby. And I said, where did you get that impression from? Well, didn't you hear him? I said, I did. But I also didn't hear him answer my question. I only have one question, and he didn't answer it. What he said was, go over there, spend some money. They'll answer your question. They're not going to answer our question. Our question is, how do we get to 13 weeks, 14 weeks? How do we get to it? Their answer is, we'll get you pregnant.
Well, and so let me just stop for a minute, because I love to, the having a baby is the problem, but really there's also a relationship dynamic going on with you and your wife. It's a very emotional deal where, oh, we're going to have a baby, but yet you got a conflict because she thinks in vitro is the answer. You think that, yeah, I've talked to you about this a little bit before the podcast here. You had other thoughts. You've been doing some research on some other things. Okay, so help us, and regardless of whether it's in vitro versus this or the blood disorder, it really is this relational deal that really has a chance to make a huge break in your marriage, because I mean, this is a serious deal. It's like, my kid, we see things like where kids have autoimmune diseases, or somebody, there's these things that happen in our marriages where, man, they're hard to get through. So what happened? How did you walk through this issue? You have 2 girls now, so something happened.
Yes.
And so what happened? Help us go through that time period of how you guys got together and went through it.
Yeah. So there was a Christian doctor that we knew the nurse's assistant. We knew the nurse assistant for that doctor. And little did we know, he had something called MTHFR also. And they had like 5 kids. But in the middle of them having 5 kids, they started having miscarriages. And this was his field. And he says, God doesn't design people this way. Why does this keep happening? Let me try to learn and understand and figure this out. And in the medical world, they only test women for MTHFR. They don't test men.
Wow. Is
So
that because it's unusual or something?
I don't know that it's unusual, but I think the science and research hasn't shown conclusively yet that if a man has MTHFR, then it'll contribute to miscarriages. And
I'm just
he's like,
impressed you can keep throwing out that acronym and know all those letters.
yeah. And he says, I studied all these men. And so he listened to our history and he goes, we'll test you, but it's 100% chance that you have MTHFR.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't need the answer, but you guys probably would like to know. And I said, well, what's the treatment for that? Turns out it was about $10 of vitamins a month.
Oh, no, really?
So we're turning to the ways of the world at $502,000 a month and $15,000 in vitro, which we never did. And instead, God had a plan, $10 a month.
Well, and I was telling you beforehand, it's like, and what's unusual about this story to me is that usually I've found in talking to lots of families that the wife is usually the holistic one, and the husband's usually like, hey, just go to the doctor, just go to the doctor, get it fixed. It's so funny because you guys are you kind of flipped on that a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. And
so how did your wife? So okay, now. I think this is fascinating because, usually a lot of times, even as men, we'll just kind of roll over on issues because, we want to make our wife happy and, happy wife, happy life, all those.
Which isn't true at all. We can stay on that topic for a while, but guys, that is not true. Don't buy into that one.
Yeah, but so how did you navigate this as a husband and leader of your home?
Yeah. So I prayed a lot about it, a lot. Like when you're in angst, when you're in the pit, when you're at the very bottom and you don't see hope, the only hope we have is the hope in Christ. And so I prayed and prayed and prayed and talked to people that were close to me in my life. And finally, the way I felt was if I stayed on the side of we're absolutely not doing in vitro and we're not even going to go to the appointment, if I stayed there, I felt like I had an extreme risk of also being divorced.
Wow.
Which we had, and guys, this is like maybe the most important marriage advice outside of staying connected to God, but sometimes you can't have that in your life. But what you can have is that agreement between you and your wife that there's never, ever an exit plan.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So I talked to a guy once and he says, we don't have a back door in our marriage. We got a brick wall.
Right. Absolutely.
So if you've got a brick wall in your marriage and you know that the two of you have to figure things out, and then I'll include God in that, it makes it easier. But if you know there's no way out, you're not looking for a way out.
Right.
So having that in place. So we had that in place. However, this was such a big thing. I felt like we might be able to discover the way out of this marriage, or she might, So I had some fear about it. However, I felt like it was the right thing to do, and praying, and the people I was talking to, I'm like, I got to stand firm on this one. So in the Bible, it says, stand firm, hold fast to what you believe in, to truth. I'm like, I've got to do that right now. And this could go the wrong way. This could be horrible. However, God, it's in your hands. I'm just going to turn it over. And I did. And calm and peace were kind of in my life. I'd still be upset. I'd still have things, but I'm like, it's in God's hands at this point. And within maybe a few days after that final point of saying, okay, God, it's all you, my wife came back around and she says, hey, I got this idea. That doctor that I never wanted to see because I didn't really like how they did things, the all natural and all that type thing. I think I'm ready to go see them now.
So you never went to the in vitro deal, or did you?
Never did. Like, deal breaker on my side, and could have been ultimately a divorce.
Yeah.
And instead she comes back around and says, hey, let's do this natural thing. And that doctor runs through a checklist. He kind of sounded a little bit arrogant, but he wasn't. He was just confident. And he says, I'm going to run through my checklist. After I get done with my checklist, then you're allowed to ask questions. And he ran through it. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. I'm like, do you say you have a 91% success rate at the end of 12 months of people getting pregnant and then having a baby?
Mm-hmm.
I go, how did you say that matter of factly when the in vitro people are bragging about we went up 0.2% last year? 0.2.
Wow.
And they're around 50% success. And you're at 91.
Wow.
And he says, oh, would you like to see the records? Are you doubting my statistics? I said, no, I'm not doubting. I'm just asking, how come you're not beating your chest? How come you're not screaming from the mountaintops talking about how great you are?
The sales guy's coming out in you.
Yeah. And he says, well, I'm not great. I just had the same problem you have. And I wanted to figure out how God has it set up in the natural world. And I wanted to follow God's way. So I took some time, got some people together, and we figured out a way to overcome MTHFR. And there's a whole lot of other challenges having babies, but in that one lane, I was one of the guys that helped figure that out.
Wow.
And now they teach like what he learned in 151 countries around the world and blah, blah, blah. It's called the Creighton model. But
the Creighton
model, CREIGHTON, like Creighton, Nebraska is where the headquarters is now.
Well, and I think I just love that. And then let's fast forward a little bit. So then another significant change happens. And I don't know how this is happening. Now you have two girls. So obviously you wound up within the 12 months getting pregnant and past the 12 weeks.
Yes.
And so now everything is, moving on. And how does that work? And so then also, where's the timing of that with you then leaving your sales position and going into the insurance business?
So it was the pregnancy that worked was exactly the time where I left. I had a salaried position, and then I started being an independent insurance broker, which didn't really come with really any guarantees or anything. And there was a Sunday I was at church, and then we went to something that maybe a lot of people have gone to called Donut Sunday. Turns out Donut Sunday was really important because my business partner, Mark, was there that day. He'd had a medical injury, and he was never at the Saturday morning men's group that I went to. And as I was telling guys what my plan was and asking for guidance, they kept pointing at the seat where he was supposed to be sitting.
Yeah.
But he was never there because turns out he was in the hospital, which I didn't know. And you know how guys are. Hey man, I heard you're hurt. You doing all right? Yeah, I'm fine. Exactly. He's in the hospital.
Yeah. Now, but let me back up just a minute though, because so you're kind of going to church at this time, but your wife's not.
My wife was not. So I had left retail, and I made that promise with God as soon as I got out of nights and weekends and all that type thing. I'll go to church. And I woke up one morning and went, oh my goodness, it's Sunday. Church, honey, I'm going to church. And she says, that's great. Where? Well, our church, the one we got married at. Okay, when is it? I have no idea, honey, but I
Wow.
got to look it up. I looked it up and found out it was like 30 minutes from the time I said, I got to get ready. I got to go. And so I, did my hair real quick, put some clothes on and ran out the door and, never missed a Sunday since.
Gotcha. And and then you're starting your business. Insurance business and totally different. Now you are going on into this straight commission
Mm-hmm.
world. Not a lot of running room, if I remember right.
Nope. Not a lot of running room. Not a lot in the bank account.
And probably spent a lot of time in that business when your kids are young and she's going through the pregnancies and all that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to my neighbor. His name's Phil. And I said, Phil, I'm trying to decide if I should push forward with this or if now's a time where I should be conservative and do the safe thing. And he looks at me. He says, your kids aren't going to remember the first couple of years.
Yeah.
As soon as you fast forward and get to 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, he goes, it's probably too late. You're probably going to have to play it safe for a really long time. If you're ever going to do the big thing, if you're ever going to get out on your own, if you're ever going to take a chance, he goes, I encourage you to take that chance right now.
Well, and one of the things, Dan, I just keep seeing in your life that I want men and women to see. This is not just a man's podcast because I think it applies everywhere. Is that, man, it seems like throughout, especially the last 15 years, that you really focus on hearing the Lord's voice.
Yes.
And sometimes that leads to, it's not like there's these standard decisions that, hey, let's go the natural route. Hey, let's go let's, a lot of Christian men or women might say, oh no, you never dig deep, in your business and abandon your family, quote unquote, abandon your family.
Right. Right.
But, but how are you doing that? You're just listening to the Lord and doing some fairly different things, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So that comes from my upbringing. So my mom always talked to me about always looking for God in everything. So, looking out my window right now, I see this tree and there's some leaves and, look at the leaves and observe them and see how it's moving. And, oh, that's a little bit of wind. There's the Holy Spirit moving in nature right now. The sun and how beautiful it is. And how does that actually work? And who is the one that designed it?
Yeah.
Oh, it wasn't us. It wasn't Don Manning. It wasn't me. Like,
Yeah.
God did that.
Even, I remember talking on your podcast. I was on your podcast, or it's coming out, I guess.
Yeah.
And, there's this whole podcast recording thing. Nobody ever knows what time is anything anymore. But like you were talking about how your business was really, and even then was God spoke to you about connecting people and making it about them, and you get the benefit of once you make it about them.
Yes.
That was hearing from the Lord, right? Explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So the when I got into the insurance business, a buddy of mine, his name's Don, also crazy dude. He was a cowboy, police officer, sheriff, truck driver, and at one time had a dog kennel. all these different things. And then he says, hey, I'm an insurance agent. I was, oh gosh, dude, isn't that boring? And whatever. And he's like, man, I'm going to be rookie of the year. And man, you're good at sales. So you ought to come do this. This is a heck of a gig over here.
Yeah.
And eventually they got me on over there. And so thankful that happened. But his mentor, I said, cool. If he can take this truck driving sheriff, police officer, all over the place kind of personality, ADD, crazy ADD. If he can take that and turn him into rookie of the year for this company, I'm like, I can follow that guy.
Yeah.
So I passed my test and I said, hey, what do I do day one? It's day one. And he goes, well, you should call a bunch of people. You should get a list. I'll give you a list. And then you just call them. Well, actually, you probably don't want to call them. You probably should hire somebody to call them all for you. And then you do appointments after that. And we'll get you a billboard and we'll send some postcards out too. I said, and then what? He says, well, that'll be it. That'll be fine. I said, I don't want to do it that way. That sounds horrible.
Right.
Is this the whole secret sauce?
Yes. I'm feeling it with you.
Yeah. I'm like, this is brutal. And I said, I tell you what.
All the reason people don't want to go in sales.
Yeah. Yeah. I said, here's the deal. I don't know any better. you've done this like 2-3 times and sold some businesses and stuff. So I'll follow that to the T. I don't need your help anymore. If that's the whole recipe and there's nothing else for me to learn, I got those lessons. I'll
Right.
figure it out.
Right.
I said, but as soon as I figure out what the next thing is and the next better way to do it, I'm abandoning this and I'm going full force in the next direction. Now, I don't know it, but I'll figure it out.
Right.
And I'll be darned if I didn't figure out through people and connections and the power of referrals. So when you do good things for other people, good things come back to you. It's just the way that it works. And Zig Ziglar's quote, if you help people get what they want, if you help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I focused on helping other people get what they want. Being in the insurance business, you can focus on real estate agents, mortgage lenders, CPAs, attorneys, financial planners. So centers of influence, people in the know. My church pastors sent me plenty of referrals over the years, which is great.
Yeah.
Hairdressers, they talk to everybody about everything, so business comes in from all over the place. But the key is to pay attention to people, listen to people, find out what's important to people, instead of asking boring questions like, hey, how was your day? Hey, how's work? Hey, what's the next big thing you're working on?
Wow.
Maybe I should be working on a big thing.
Wow. So
Or
it's
maybe they are working on a
yeah.
big thing, Hey,
Yeah.
Don, tell me what the next level of Crazy Cool Family is.
Right.
And then you're like, here's the next thing I'm working on. And you get fired up and excited about it, as opposed to, hey, how's work going, Don?
Yeah.
It's going all right.
Oh,
Like whatever. So ask unique and different questions that get people engaged and talking and fired up and energetic. And that truly, so find people that are experts at things. I found a guy that was an expert. He had a huge real estate business in the past and sold it. People usually don't sell real estate businesses, but this guy did. And I stumbled into him by accident. And he says, I'll coach you, but I can only teach you real estate. And I said, that'll be perfect, because I want to learn how to grow a big business, which you've already done. And if you're going to teach me through real estate, well, so be it. You're my only option. I don't know anybody else that can show me what I want to learn.
yeah.
And if you teach me real estate, what I'll do with that is I'll teach real estate people real estate.
Gotcha.
So show me everything you got. Show me the whole playbook. We'll write a book together, whatever it takes, but I'll take each chapter and then I'll pass it on to real estate agents. So I learned one chapter at a time, stayed one chapter ahead of the real estate agents and mortgage lenders. Turns out mortgage lenders like to help real estate agents. So I kind of just focused on learning real estate to help professionals grow their businesses. And then that has paid off in spades over time. So people often ask, hey, what's in this for you? Hey, what are you doing this for? Why are you helping me?
Wow. And doesn't that principle to apply back into your family?
Absolutely.
How have and when you look at looking out for the best interest of your children, of your spouse, whoever it is, and trying to figure, hey, what are you dreaming about? Having those conversations with, we talk about a Crazy Cool Family, how you bring out the best in your spouse. That it's not about changing them to be who you are. It's about changing them into the best they can be, and it's funny, just wild how you're applying that in business. And I bet you're applying it in your family too.
Yes. So that's a mistake that guys make, is we'll learn something in one area of our life, but then we won't apply it anywhere else.
Yeah.
So the stuff we learn in business, we should apply to our wives, our friends, our faith even. And then the stuff we learn in faith, we should apply to business, and the stuff we learn from our kids, because our kids can be our greatest teachers.
At some point, did the guy, I'm going back to the neighbor who said, first 3 or 4 years, you dive into it. At some point, that business, it really did pay off, because that business crested, and now you were able to reposition your life to where now you're coaching softball and you're doing some of the things what does your life look like differently when in your business life now versus when the kids were younger?
Oh my goodness. So when the kids were younger, this is good and bad, but this is the real truth. I learned this from a friend of mine. He was a financial planner, and he says, honey, here's the deal. if you'll give me, and I forget what the years were, I think it was 3. Honey, if you give me Monday through Friday, 12 hours a day, and you give me also Saturday morning, I can create a lifestyle for us that I'll never have to work on the weekends again. I'll never have to work past 5 p.m. Monday through Friday ever again. We'll be able to do vacations. We'll be able to have the
While
exact
the wife
lifestyle.
has the 2-year-olds at home for the whole 12 hours and all this stuff, because usually that's going to be a stay-at-home mom.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I said, well, I'll take that play and I'll share that one with my wife, see what she says. And I told her 2 years. I said, give me 2 years. Don't restrain me. Just allow me to do what I do. Um, you don't necessarily need to help outside of the help that you'll have to do during that 12 hours. Turns out I never work Saturdays. I think I've done maybe three Saturday mornings, in the last 10 years,
Yeah.
even at the very beginning. But I needed that time where I could just be solely focused on figuring out how to crack the code, do the next level, to study, to practice, to teach. And, within 2 years, things took off and blew past my expectations. I accomplished my 5-year goal in 2.5 years, accomplished my 10-year goal in 5 years, and have one of the, you know, biggest referral insurance businesses in the country. So,
Wow, that's fascinating. And I mean, and then, how did, let's kind of, as we're wrapping this up, I want to take the faith journey of eventually your wife starts to go to church with you.
yes, yes, yes. So,
How did all that happen? Because, like we were talking before, honestly, most of the time the woman is leading the spiritual charge
mhm.
in a home. Most of the time when people sign up for base camp, things like that, it's the wife signing up, not the husband. They tend to be more engaged in family spiritual matters. What happened in that in your home?
Yeah, in my home, so I started going to church. I was solo. We had children, and I said, "Honey, I want to take Ollie. I want to take her to church." And she says, "No, there's no way you could handle a baby at church. As we all know, it's just a car seat you set next to you. Like,
Right.
done. That's it. That's the whole handle the baby at church kind of thing. And if she cries, whatever." But she wouldn't let me bring baby number 1 to church. Wouldn't let me bring number 2 to church. Finally, she allows me to start taking 1 to church, and it's one of my favorite memories ever. Just for 6 months, just me and my one daughter, and I'd hold her the whole service, and it was wonderful. And then I started praying for my wife, and I've been praying every day, consistent. And um, finally, one day, I was just done. I left the church service. The pastor's out front, 4,500 family church. The pastor's never alone, and we're in the courtyard. He's alone, and I said, "Hey, you got a minute?" He looks around and goes, "I don't see anybody else around here." I said, "Here's the thing. I've been want my wife to come to church. She doesn't come to church with me. I've been praying. He goes, "Well, let me ask you some questions. Are you praying every day?" "Yes." "You got any major sin in your life?" "No." He goes, "Have you confessed to the Lord your sins?" "Yes." He says, "Are you come to church faithfully every week?" He goes, "Scratch that question. I already know the answer to that one. I see you here every week." And I said, "Okay. And?" He goes, "Well, I guess if you're doing all that stuff, I don't understand what the problem is." I said, "Well, as the leader of my house, our family's supposed to be going to church. Like, this is critical. We got to be on the same page, equally yoked. Like,
Yeah.
this is critically important. If I'm getting to heaven, I'm bringing my family with me, and it's mine. Like, dang it, listen to me." And he goes, "Okay." Again, I'm not hearing the problem. I squint my eyes, clench my fist. I'm like, "Come on, man."
Right.
He goes, "Well, let me ask you a different question. Whose time are you trying to do this on?"
Oh, wow.
And I said, "Mine." "I told you I'm done." And he looks up and he goes, "Again, whose time are you trying to do this on?" And I look up and I look at him, and I knew he had caught me. I knew he had trapped me into a answer that I didn't want to hear.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I said, "Hey, are you telling me I can skip out of here happy as a lark?" And he goes, "Skip away."
Oh, wow.
And would you believe the very next Saturday, my wife says to me, "Hey, what time's church tomorrow?"
Mm.
I
And that,
didn't do anything that week
and that was
except
probably
pray.
what, 8 years ago, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, man, what a story. And then you guys are, and even then, even though you guys weren't sharing church, you had also laid some ground rules of we don't have a back door for our, for our marriage. I mean, so there were things that you were doing principally, from
Hmm.
a principle standpoint, and it sounds like both of you guys are pretty positive people overall. So that
Hmm.
was helpful. But so now on this journey of faith, so how is being involved in the church and more pursuing your faith together, what's that done for your family over the last 8 years or so?
So we are not meant to do life alone. So going back to church, I started going to a Saturday men's group. Saturday men's group read the passage about men are the spiritual leaders of the home, which I was just skipped that chapter and moved on because my wife was pretty good at running the home and did a bunch of things and made it easy for me to, not do laundry, not do the dishes. You're doing it wrong.
Yeah,
You're fired.
right.
Cool. So I got fired from so many jobs and she was doing fine on her own, didn't need my help. And then that convicted me. I said, "Oh man, I'm hearing it this time. I don't want to hear this." Hopefully they'll skip to the next chapter and we can quit talking about this. But they didn't. They stayed on it. And I was like, and then they said there was a stat. It's like 8 to 12% of kids will go to church on their own if parents aren't churchgoers after high school. And if mom's a churchgoer, it'll be like 12 to 14%. If mom's the reason why the family goes to church, 12 to 14% of the kids will go to church on their own. And I said, this is garbage because they're going to say if dads are the ones, it'll be 16 to 18%. And I'm like, I don't like those odds. Those are bad odds. I
Yeah.
want my kids to be churchgoers. I want them to be faithful. And at the time, gosh, I don't even know if I had a child at that time. I don't think I did. But, looking ahead to the future, and then the statistic was 89 to 92% of kids will go to church on their own after high school if the dad is the reason the family goes to church. I said, sign me up.
Yeah.
I'm
Exactly.
in, God. I am the spiritual leader of my house from today on. I went home and I said, hey, honey, there's some things changing.
Wow. And and it has changed, right? I mean,
It has
your
absolutely
family is
changed.
in church, your family is connected. I mean, again, it's not perfect, but you see your kids walking a path of faith. Your wife is walking a path of faith. You know,
Yes.
um, I can remember being probably 10 years into my marriage too, and just going, looking at, I had 4 girls, maybe I had a son at the time, and going, I'm not losing this battle. And I feel like that's kind of what you said too. I said, I don't know what winning looks like, but
Right.
I know what losing looks like. Those kids that aren't going to church, that aren't full of faith, and are doing things that are alienated from their parents. I said, I am not going to have that for my. If I do, I can't really control it because I don't control the kids. But if it doesn't happen, I'm going to be bloody, battered, and bruised. They're going to drag me off that field. And I feel like you kind of had the same moment with your pastor there.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That was not one I was willing to lose.
And I feel like if we can, like maybe the kind of the ending message to dads in particular here is if dads, you'll do that. And you've had to make some hard leadership decisions in your family through this, right? Of challenging, of encouraging, and then sometimes just praying and letting go. I think, all those things come out, but I feel like and so often we just get dads that are just being passive. I just want to make my wife happy. I just want to make it. And so maybe we can kind of end it. What would you say? And even going through your Christian journey of a Christian dad podcast, um, kind of parting words for these dads. What would you say to them as, you know, um, parting thoughts for them?
So I got a few different ones. One of them, I had a men's group. I had 12 guys in this group. All of them were super successful business wise, and all of them are Christian. All of them had pretty good families. And I said, hey, what about the visionary side of your family? Who does that? What about your wife? And blah, blah, blah. Every one of them said in a different way, but my wife's kind of got her head down and she's kind of charging ahead, executing the plan. And when I talk vision with her, she's got her head down. She's like, whatever, like, I'm just going. And so look up, like, stop wherever you are in life, look up, periodically review, and think about where you actually want to go. Different friend of mine had, the weekend thing where you do games all day long. And he looks at his wife and says, are we happy? Are you happy? And she says, no, this is horrible. We got 5 kids and all we do is run to sporting events all the time. And like,
Yes.
ah. And he says, all right, let's quit. She's like, we can't quit. Like, what would our friends and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, how about we go rock climbing instead? So they rock climb as a family and it's peaceful and they've got a little community, blah, blah, blah. But point is, he said, he stopped, asked a question. He looked up, God help us out here. Give me some wisdom. So I'd say that, guys, you don't have to be on this merry-go-round roller coaster, letting the path take you wherever the path takes you. You can be in charge of that. You can make decisions. You can ask questions such as, hey, honey, if our lives could be anything that we wanted our lives to be, money's not an obstacle. Friends aren't an obstacle. Our vehicles aren't obstacles. Our loan debt that we have isn't. If we had no obstacles and we could just design the ultimate life that we wanted, what would it be? What would it be?
It's
One of the questions I have is, if you could accomplish anything you wanted in your life, what would it be?
wow.
And often guys will move to success. They'll move to business success. They'll move to money. I'll get a lake house. Whatever. I'm like, really? That's it? That's the ultimate? That's the ultimate? Money
Wow.
comes and go. Things come and go. What about eternal? What about the eternal perspective? And I'm like, it's such a simple answer. I'm going to get to heaven. That's what I'm going to do.
Mhm.
And I'm going to help everybody around me get to heaven, especially those closest to me. And I'm going to have a system, and I'm going to keep working on that system and keep getting better at that system, because that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, it just seems like, I love the way you love to inspire people and the way you love to hear God's voice. It feels like, to you, life is not a prison, it's an adventure. And it's an adventure into the kingdom things. And when we start to, it's not that business success is wrong or playing sports is wrong. It's really just, I love it the way God speaks to us uniquely. And when dads, especially as the leaders of their homes, will listen to God's voice and go into and be willing to be bold. You went into the insurance business and you didn't have a big, didn't have a big backstop there to carry you, and just all the things that you've done. Man, I hope men, especially, that you're encouraged, and wives, with this. I think a role that the wife can play is to encourage your husband to lead. So often, I think that the wives will, as wives, we're not wives, but the wives will kind of put a rein on the parade of the vision of their husband. No, 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 no. And there is value in that, but sometimes the wife can overdo it. Let your husband dream with them. Let them be who they are as they are trying to help you be the best you can be. So, man, such good wisdom there, Dan. Thanks so much for joining us. The Journey of a Christian Dad podcast, we'll put the link in the show notes. And it's just so inspiring what you're telling moms and dads about how to step into to everything God has for their lives and their family.
Yes, absolutely. And same thing for the guys, for your wives.
Yeah.
Encourage them, shower them with praise, pour into them, fill their sails with compliments, and allow them to grow and blossom like flowers. Like, cherish your wife like she's the pearl and the jewel that they talk about in the Bible.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we get in our thoughts, we think about all the negative and all the complaints we have about our life, about our wife, about our whatever. It's like, put that noise aside, take captive those thoughts, transform them, write things down of gratitude every day about your spouse. Think about ways where you can build her up, and do that every day. And your mind will change. You will become grateful for your wife. You'll fall more in love with your wife. You cannot allow those negative thoughts to take root. That's the devil. That's Satan. That's the world. And we got to get away from that stuff and get into abundance, get into heaven, get into love and God. So I love that you said, wives, encourage your husbands. Absolutely. And husbands, look to take care of your wives. Look to let her know how lovely she is every day.
I was just I was teaching at a conference this last weekend, and we were talking about Ephesians 5, where it says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and made her holy. And basically it says, I'm paraphrasing, but it says, make her holy and radiant.
Yes.
Radiant means to exude with love, joy, and confidence. What if your wife, or wives, what if you had made your husband, what if you did things so that your husband or your wife would exude with love, joy, and confidence? I just thought, what a great definition that God put the word radiant in there. And I applied it to the kids.
That's awesome.
Isn't that cool?
Yes.
So, super inspiring and just encouraging. And I hope that we can take this, husbands and wives, and say, I want something different for my life. I want something more. I want more of the kingdom. I want to listen to God. So thanks, Dan, for being with us. We'll wrap it up. And as always, parents, go be crazy. crazycoolfamily.com.